Ja'Marr Chase should be the number one overall player in your Dynasty rankings. We'll explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers, you can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. And it's a Wednesday show. So, of course, Matt Williamson is here. Follow him on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. On today's show, we're going to be talking about some running back trade values, including Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, and Jonathan Brooks. We'll talk about who is the number 2 quarterback and tight end in your dynasty leagues. But, Matt, I want to start with this. Justin Jefferson has been the consensus number 1 overall player in dynasty leagues for the last, it looks like 26 months, 27 months, which I got to believe like that's the longest stretch we've had for a player occupying that spot in a long time.
Maybe since Odell. I remember when Ryan and I started this, Odell was that guy for early in his career for a long stretch.
Yeah, and maybe even before that, Adrian Peterson in early 2010s, probably. My question to you.
Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, we go back to Ladainian Tomlinson.
It's supposed to be Throwback Thursday, not Throwback Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Steve Largent. Yeah, right.
That's when we are still playing fantasy by reading the newspaper on Monday mornings.
Jimmy Brown, Marcus. It's Jimmy Brown.
There
is the
you
answer.
go.
Right. Yeah.
Matt, who is your number 1 overall player in non-Superflex dynasty leagues?
Yeah, I think Ja'Marr Chase has done enough. I mean, he's a year younger, but I don't even care about that. I mean, who knows who's going to play longer. I think Burrow being locked up, and I don't think there's any chance Chase leaves Cincinnati. I do think Higgins leaves, but I really don't even care about situation that much. I think he's just been slightly better than Jefferson on tape, but we're really splitting hairs here. A couple other names. First off, I think it has to be a receiver. I mean, if I have first overall pick, I'm not taking any other position. I think Neighbors could get in the conversation, and I think Nico and Puka aren't far off and are at least making a case to be number 3, but I do think it's very much a 2-horse race.
Kate, where are you at with this?
I think I'm actually leaning towards Chase as well. And I have kind of teetered between these guys. Look, to be clear, I think you could have any of the first 5 picks in a dynasty startup draft, and I think you're in great shape. I don't really think there's a wrong answer here at the top of the pecking order. You mentioned Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors. Like, there is a richness of talent at top of the wide receiver position right now. So it really is splitting hairs. I mean, when you look at their production, I tend to agree with you, Matt. I think Ja'Marr Chase a little bit better on tape. Situation, I would give the edge to Ja'Marr Chase right now in terms of having the quarterback situation kind of figured out. Obviously, we've had long-term health concerns for Joe Burrow just because he has dealt with a number of injuries in his career, though they're not the same injuries over and over again. So I think that's a plus. Gonna probably be the highest paid wide receiver here in just a minute. I think the Bengals fumbled that massively by not getting that contract extension done before his total tear of a season. Ja'Marr Chase, 14 more touchdowns than Justin Jefferson dating back to 2020, ranks 3rd in fantasy points per game dating back to that span among all wide receivers with 200 plus targets dating back to 2021. Only behind Cooper Kupp, averaging 17 fantasy points per game, and Justin Jefferson, 16.6. But like, it's a hair. It's a hair between the two. Ja'Marr Chase averaging 16.3. So like, I think you really have to go with your kind of feel on the situation. I just think with the question marks in Minnesota, with maybe the richness of talent in Minnesota between Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, I'll give the slight edge to Ja'Marr Chase.
All right, Matt, I got a couple questions for you.
All right.
Number one, when is the last time we've seen a quarterback and wide receiver play this many years together? When you go back from like Burrow at LSU with Ja'Marr Chase, they're going to be playing together for the next 5-6 years. It just seems like we don't get this many quarterback wide receiver pairings that are going to last a decade or so anymore.
That's great. I have to think about it a little bit, but I can't think of one that carried over from college to NFL. Can you?
No,
guys?
That's what makes it so unique, right?
I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I immediately thought like Marvin Harrison and Wayne and Peyton, like those guys, that were all kind of drafted close to each other, stuck around forever, awesome Hall of Fame type guys on both sides of the battery. But I can't think of one that were hanging out when they were 18 and 19.
Right. So I'm leaning Chase with you guys as well. But if you're going to make the argument for Jefferson, it's that he's been able to produce similar numbers with how many different quarterbacks? It's Sam Darnold now, Jaron Hall, Josh Dobbs, Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins. He's basically been able to produce no matter who is at quarterback. And there's still, as great as Burrow has played this year, Matt, there's still in the back of my mind the idea that this is not the most durable guy out there. And he's always, shaking his wrist, and he's dealing with a knee injury now. And that part does concern me just a little bit, not enough to switch them, but enough to make it so close where I really don't care either way.
To take it a step further, and I don't want to sound too Steeler-esque or AFC North-esque, of course, but I think
the good point here. Yeah.
I think the Vikings are just a much more stable organization, coaching staff, environment overall. Like the Bengals' record over the last 2 years does not match their talent. And you could see Chase and Burrow on the sidelines often frustrated this year. So, I did a deep dive on them right after they played the Steelers and kind of came to the conclusion that the Bengals need O-line help. They're going to need another receiver. They might need 7 starters, maybe 8 on defense. Like, could this turn into like Matthew Stafford in Detroit, and Burrow and Chase are looking at each other like, we're all we got here. I want out of here in a year. It could be a frustrating situation.
But that's good for us in dynasty leagues, right? Because Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson are pretty fun together, right? But I guess I go back to when you're playing in the AFC North, you're going to be playing in a lot of bad weather games, a lot of outdoor games, and usually, not this year, but usually against some pretty good defenses. Whereas if you're playing in the NFC North, like Jefferson is, a lot of dome games, the Vikings play in a dome. You're just going to be in better environments for higher scoring games. Again, it's so close.
Good point.
We have to nitpick. I would say, again, I'm still leaning Chase because he's one of the best college receivers I've seen since Larry Fitzgerald back in like 2002. I think I would just lean with the talent here.
I got my my Pitt sweatshirt on from when Larry and I were in the same staff. How about it? Let's go. Good reference.
Is there it always comes back to Pittsburgh on this show. I don't know how we do that. Kate, is there any thought at number 1 overall going with not a quarterback? Matt showing off his nice IceShaker right there. I like it. Any thought of going with not a quarterback and maybe going with a different position like
you mean a wide receiver? No wide receivers.
Like, what if it's Brock Bowers? Can you justify taking Brock Bowers, who's 5th in the NFL in receiving yards this year, over the receivers?
I think the only place you could possibly make that argument is in a tight end premium league. And maybe this is me just kind of poo-pooing on the Raiders a little bit. But again, when you look at the organizational stability of, the Minnesota Vikings, of, the structure they have in place that is going to allow Ja'Marr Chase to play with Joe Burrow for hopefully the duration of their careers. Like, I don't think there is that kind of stability there that I'm going to feel comfortable investing in the Raiders. Hopefully they get the quarterback position figured out, but when they do, I'm also going to expect for them to, invest in some other weapons around them. I just don't think the tight end position specifically is usually a place I want to utilize a top pick in my draft.
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, it would have to be tight end premium. And even so, I'm with Kate. I mean, he's awesome. I mean, he's a tremendous talent. Has tremendous usage, but they're going to have a new head coach and a new quarterback. I mean, are they going to, is that group going to feed him the same? Maybe more. I don't know, but it's a little bit uncertain. And I would definitely much rather invest in many receivers. I mean, there's probably 8 receivers I would take ahead of him.
I just don't know how the situation can get worse for Brock Bowers in Las Vegas, right? The quarterback situation has been a mess. They fired their offensive coordinator this year. They're on to their 3rd starting quarterback this year with Desmond Ridder, and it doesn't seem to be making a difference. I agree with you guys, though. Like, I would take Chase. I would take Jefferson. I would take CeeDee Lamb over Bowers. But depending on how the final 4 weeks of the season goes, maybe that list gets narrowed down a little bit. I'm going to be curious to see what Bowers does over the final month. Matt, let's talk about some running backs and their trade values, because I think some of these running backs have some wildly different values as we enter the last month of the season. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments, just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free. You can earn valuable Built points on your rent every day, spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. I love using the points for travel. It makes it so easy to turn your rent into rewards. If you're already paying rent, why not make it work for you? Start earning points on your rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LOCKEDONNFL. That is joinbuilt.com/LOCKEDONNFL, and make sure to use our link so they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We're answering your mailbag questions. And Matt, I want to talk to you about some running back trade value. So this one is more of my problem. I have Saquon Barkley in a league where I am not very competitive. Kate knows this league that I'm talking about. And I've been bombarded with trade offers for Saquon Barkley, and nothing has been all that appealing lately. So if you are a Saquon owner, manager, and you're not competitive, what would you be willing to give up? What would you need to get back for Saquon?
It's a tough one. I mean, because he's remarkably productive, obviously, not showing any signs of wear and tear, but he is at 27 years old, and that's used to be a magic number before Henry and these guys started really extending their careers. A future first isn't enough. I mean, I'm sure that's like the jumping off point. I'm sure you were offered that. Were you offered that several times?
Yes, it would be like that and Michael Pittman straight up. And
I was going to say, and
it just hasn't done enough for me. Like, it's just like, do I really want to trade Barkley for a late first round pick and Michael Pittman? It just doesn't move the needle.
I was going to say Jaden Reed
would rather do that.
Yes. Like a first or second year highly promising receiver, not Pittman, and a first. And now we're talking. And then maybe you can massage it a little bit. Like, oh, I kind of like that tight end you have too. I'll upgrade there slightly or whatever. You know what I mean? But I would think that's a good jumping off point, is a young receiver that's really promising, not Neighbors, somebody like that, and a late first. I mean, would you do it for, I know it doesn't work this way, but would you do it for 1-1 next year?
Yes.
I think I would too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think at that point, you're probably getting Ashton Genty, who is likely a top 15 pick in this class, 21, 22 years old. You're just rolling back the clock. Yeah, exactly. Kate, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what would you need to get back in a trade?
It definitely has to be a first rounder plus. Now, I think the suggestion of getting, maybe a younger wide receiver back, always great. I think it's so important to build a strong foundation of receiving weapons, because we know that there's just a lot more stability when it comes to both, the production and the value of wide receivers year over year. Now, what I think is like a more interesting question. We've talked a lot about the value of, some of these running backs that aren't necessarily top tier, like let's say out of the top 5, right? There's a very deep running back class coming into this year. Are there any circumstances where you would break that down into Saquon Barkley for a first and a young running back? And if you could get a young running back in that trade, who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, like James Cook is the guy that I still love, and I would love to have James Cook on my team. But usually, when you're trading Barkley, the manager wants to pair Barkley with James Cook, like they have a need at running back, and that's what it's made a lot of these trades hard in a couple of the different leagues I'm in. But I think you're right, Kate. Like I think if you can break him down into the next tier of running back and a first round pick, I think that makes sense.
So
Right.
I brought up a trade that I did. I traded away Christian McCaffrey. Now this was before his season-ending injury, but I needed to move on from Christian McCaffrey. I needed a return, so I got a first-round pick and Marshawn Lloyd, who I think, obviously not off to a great start in his rookie season, but I think could be the future of the running back position on a team that really wants to run the football. Are there other names like Marshawn Lloyd that you think like this is a great dart throw that I want to take a chance on in
Chuba Hubbard? I mean, that's
we
talked about that on yesterday's show.
The problem is though that if you're dealing with the Chuba Hubbard manager, they probably want Chuba Hubbard for their championship run. That's the problem.
Matt, I wanted to ask you about Christian McCaffrey because Kate brought him up.
Before we do, I was going to throw some name game at you here. Like, what if you went straight up for Brian Thomas? Are you just saying yes to that?
I've actually been offered that, and I've said no a couple times straight up.
Really?
And because of positional value. That's all.
Okay. I was going to say like Rome and a 2.
I think I would need more.
I
feel like
in a 2.
Yeah, I feel like Saquon is just going to age really well behind this offensive line. I mean, he's not.
You might be asking a little too much.
I could be. I probably am. But I feel like if I'm going to trade away Barkley, I want to be blown away from an offer. I don't want to come away from the trade feeling like, did I give him away for too little? I think I'm willing to hold him through the offseason and see what the offers are then.
Okay. Like, I don't think you can get Pickens or JSN or Flowers.
Here's the thing, though, Marcus. I don't think that value, like, this is kind of the learning lesson, right? Like, this is the moment where you can jack up the value.
Do you think the value is going to go down this offseason, Kate?
I think, like, absolutely.
A month ago, I think, was your peak.
Yeah, sure. And I think you're still in a high prime time because you can say, like, look, do you want to sell your soul for a championship? And that's the leverage that you might have over a competitive roster right now is like, hey, he's useless for me. He's actually hurting me. But are you willing to sell your soul to the devil being you, Marcus, for Saquon Barkley? Because he's going to carry you to a championship. So, like, it's just, do you want to pay up? Like, what was the famous saying? F them picks. Like, that's the angle you need to be taking here, because I think once the offseason comes, the hype's going to die down. We're not going to be hearing Saquon Barkley MVP chants all the time. No. We're not going to be seeing them in prime time. You're not going to get that constant exposure to the Saquon Barkley experience. And this is the time where, like, you can really milk that for what it's worth. You can milk the MVP discussions. Like, in the off season, you're projecting. And I also think that the off season is a great time to think about, like, well, what if Philly, does this? What if something happens? What if they make a trade? What if they, like, that's the time where I think all of the speculative nature of the off season can kind of suppress a player's value, because nobody wants to make a move before they understand the landscape. And it takes time to do that.
First of all, Barkley's not hurting my chances because my team is very bad. So that's okay. You guys are probably right. I'm willing to, we'll see. I'll report back next week and I'll let you guys know if I'm able to trade him.
Real quick things, Marcus. Obviously the rookie draft could be a window too. Someone's picking 105. They don't love who's on the board. You do. And you make a swap and maybe you get a little spare change involved as well. And how about this Barkley fun fact? And you guessed it, they're playing the Steelers this week. I've done a lot of Eagles research. He's been tackled on the one 11 times this year.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
That's a stat that I would be floating in the group chat, Marcus.
Yeah, there you go.
I know there's a world where the tush push gets banned, and all of a sudden Barkley has 22 touchdowns at this point this year.
Maybe they'll throw him the ball.
It'd be nice. All right, let's talk about the quarterback and tight end positions in Dynasty, because we know who the top players are at those positions, but who's at number 2? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by IceShaker. Hey, LOCKEDON fans, I know that you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, let's say, far from complete. Well, if that's the case, we've got the perfect gift for you. Perhaps you've heard of IceShaker. IceShaker is now the officially licensed water bottle for the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make the ideal gift. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, IceShakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is a gift that you've been looking for. Go to IceShaker.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. Matt showed off his earlier in the podcast. I got my Cowboy one right here. It's absolutely fantastic. It'll keep water cool for over 30 hours, 35 hours. It's phenomenal. Order your team branded bottles today at IceShaker.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. IceShakers. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Matt, I wanted to ask you about 2 positions, quarterback and tight end. We know that Josh Allen is the clear-cut number 1 overall quarterback in Dynasty, but who's number 2 for you right now?
Yeah, and frankly, if we were doing a startup, I probably wouldn't pull the trigger on number 2 because I don't think it's clear at all. Like, I wouldn't force myself to make that decision. I'd either trade back or go a different direction.
But that's not the game here, Matt.
I know.
You gotta play the game.
So I'm going with Lamar. I would have Lamar over Daniels, but Lamar is my 2, Daniels is my 3. But I still think there's a substantial gap after 1.
Kate.
I think Matt's on point here. I've been kind of teetering between Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels was my QB2, at some point early October. I since have walked that back just a little bit because I think we've seen more of the downs. It's not all top 5 as we've gotten with Lamar Jackson. And I mean, Lamar Jackson just continues to prove, we obviously praise his prowess on the ground, but his touchdown production has come through his arm this year. He's getting plenty of yardage on the ground, but he's not posting Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown numbers. His true, the nature of his MVP is coming through his arm right now. And I think he continues to be an underrated passer throughout just national media circles, fan circles, what have you. I just think the floor is probably so safe there because, I mean, even you look at the weapons, Zay Flowers, absolutely incredible, but, still a second-year player. You have Mark Andrews, who has, dealt with some health issues last year, got off to a really slow start this year. Like, they don't have the most dominant, receiving core in the league, much like the Buffalo Bills, but he continues to find a way to get it done every single week. I just think the safety of a Lamar Jackson is just probably what's going to give him an edge over a guy like Jaden Daniels.
Kate, I'm glad that you brought up safety because that's why I'm going with Jalen Hurts as my QB2. Jalen Hurts, he scored double-digit rushing touchdowns in each of the last 4 years. He's got 51 rushing touchdowns since 2021, at least 500 rushing yards in all of those seasons. I also just trust this Philadelphia organization to put a good offensive line in front of him, to give him weapons. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both locked up for the foreseeable future. I just think he's going to be a lock to get you double-digit rushing touchdowns every year. I think his body is a little bit more durable, maybe than Lamar Jackson. I know it's not exciting. I know he's not as talented as Lamar or Mahomes or Daniels, but Matt, I feel confident and comfortable with Hurts as my QB2.
I don't. And part of this is because it's Steeler Eagles week, and I've really dug into them.
And everything goes back to Pittsburgh. Everything.
I'm not that impressed with them. I don't think he's very. I think that everyone. I mean, like Carolina just kept him in the pocket and made him throw. I mean, they have taken so much off his plate that they're telling you that they don't trust him. And you mentioned it's a great organization, but I'm going out on a limb here. I'm not predicting it, but could they do a Carson Wentz, draft the guy in the second round? You're kind of expensive, Jalen. Trade him to the Jets or something and go cheap.
It's possible.
I think there's a reason AJ Brown's frustrated with him.
Of course. I mean, there's no doubt that Hurts has his flaws, but even in a bad performance like he had last week, he had 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown.
Oh, he always produces. Yeah.
And that's the thing is even when he's bad, he produces.
Yeah.
The question about Jalen Hurts is in his safety for me has nothing to do with the stats he produces. He produces stats regardless of, I mean, he completed 21 pass attempts, had 3 touchdowns last week. Like there's no question that like from a fantasy standpoint, he's safe. What doesn't make him safe for me long-term in terms of his dynasty valuation is it feels like there's something brewing in Philadelphia. And this is not the first time that I feel like we have heard musings about Jalen Hurts and his fit within this organization and them not sure if he's totally the guy. I don't know if it's a vibe thing. I don't know what it is. Cause on paper, like before Philadelphia, never really heard any rumors that, there was poor leadership there. Never heard really any negative buzz about Jalen Hurts, the man. But it feels like this is the second, maybe third time that we've just kind of gotten this buzz. And this is when they're on a 9-game winning streak. 9-game winning streak. And
soon to be 10. Yeah.
It still feels like they are setting up a situation where they're going to play. If things go wrong, they know exactly who they're pointing the finger at. Like I don't like the vibes around Jalen Hurts with the organization right now. And it has nothing to do with the stat production, nothing like that. But like, what do you make of kind of the conjecture, the vibes coming out of Philly right now? Because it does feel like he's the one they're pointing the arrows at right now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this has always been a loud team for a variety of reasons. And yeah, they're struggling to throw the ball. I don't think it's a situation where they're giving up on him anytime soon. Now, maybe in the future, 2-3 years down the road, I think it's possible. But they've just won so many games over the last couple of years that I have a hard time believing that Howie's going to bail on Jalen Hurts right now. So before we go, just really quickly, I wanted to mention the tight end position.
Okay. I have one thing I want to throw out there with quarterbacks. I apologize. I hesitate to bring it up because even the Joe Burrows get hurt a bunch and all that, but I wonder, and this is maybe even more Josh Allen than Hurts, Lamar, etc. Is the Cam Newton fate end of the career looming for these guys too? Like, how much of a beating can you take for how long before you just fall off a cliff?
And honestly,
that's a whole show. I mean, that's a whole conversation.
That's why part of me just wants to say like Patrick Mahomes, and like I know that he's probably not going to be a top 3 fantasy quarterback in any of the upcoming years. But he's
really good. And he's not going anywhere.
Years, right? Yeah. So there is safety in that floor.
That's a good call. And McBride's my number 2 tight end.
There you go. Who's your number 2 tight end, Kate?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of struggling at this point to figure it out because again, we are looking at an organization with the Arizona Cardinals where things look like they're going right and things are, for the most part going right, but Trey McBride still struggling to get involved in terms of, red zone production. Can't come down with those touchdowns. He's never been a big touchdown guy.
He's got 31 receptions.
I think it's a 3-way tie between McBride, Laporta, and TJ Hawkinson for me.
Sorry, 33 receptions over the last 3 games for Trey McBride. That's still where I'm leaning. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Check out the channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Williamson NFL. Follow Kate at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.